Good morning. Thank you, Carlene, for such beautiful music to begin with, and welcome all. Welcome members, guests, visitors, friends, musicians, and everybody. I'm just glad to be back. I'm Vanessa Cowie, today's worship associate, and today we also welcome the Reverend Dr. Neal Jones as a guest to our pulpit. He'll have a fuller introduction later in the service, but we are glad to have him. One of the great gifts of this community is that it's a container for our deepest griefs and sorrows and our soaring joys and gratitude. And you are always invited to light a candle among our joys and sorrows candle in order to share those heartfelt feelings with the rest of this community. And I've been away for 2 weeks and visiting my daughter, which was a joy, and it's a joy to be back. So I'm going to light one for myself. And if there's anyone else here who has not taken the opportunity and would like to share a joy or sorrow, please so indicate, and I'll light it and repeat it from the mic so those at home and those in this room can hear. That's Gail. Gail, yes. Thank you, Gail. The 1-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. You'll hear more about that in just a bit. Yes, Vicki. Dear friend of Sharon's and Vicky's who lost her partner this week. And let's see, I saw another hand. Roberta, yeah. I'm sorry. Roberta, a candle for Jan Hart. And Jan Hart passed this week. Erin.
My stepbrother's stepfather is in hospice care.
For Erin's stepfather, who is in hospice care. There's Philip. Yeah. For President Carter, who is also in hospice care. And yes.
We need some good news. I am thankful for everyone who is here. Thank you.
From Gail, a candle of gratitude and joy for everyone who's here. And Krista?
A candle of joy that Richard can hear me.
Hooray! A candle of joy. Absolutely. Absolutely a joy that Richard is on his way to recovering hearing. His cochlear implant was activated this week. And we had a conversation yesterday, didn't we? That is a joy indeed. I saw another hand, Carol.
That's something I read in the Week magazine. They have the cartoons in there. One of the cartoons is Jesus talking to a crowd of people. And the people in the crowd are saying, he's too woke for me.
So, Carol for a woke Jesus. Amen. I saw another hand, I think.
I would like to celebrate, although there is great sorrow with what's going on in Ukraine, the courage, the immense courage of the Ukrainians.
Judith, for the courage of the Ukrainian people. Thank you. Others? Yes.
One more joy, Susan River Freeman is out of the hospital following a bout with pneumonia, and she and Elizabeth are still in Georgia trying to get Susan River stronger before they come home.
Susan Slocum, right? A candle for Susan River Freeman, who is out of the hospital, still in Georgia, as she continues to recover. And thank you for that candle. And I'm going to light one more for all the joys and sorrows that may be unvoiced at this time, and for any that may have been shared online this morning that we can't see. And now let's take just a few moments to recognize the worth and dignity in each other. So a brief greeting. The worth and dignity in me recognizes the worth and dignity in you. I greet you. And feel free to greet your neighbor.
Vanessa, do you take time to introduce any visitors who are here this morning? I have a couple. There's a couple, but there are friends of mine I'd like to introduce.
Why don't you
I'd like to, yeah. I'd be glad to. Yeah.
we want to recognize that there's some visitors this morning. Reverend Neal?
Sure. I'd like to recognize two visitors who are friends of mine, Terry and Cindy Decker in the back, and their granddaughter Sophia. Now, they are managers of something here in Brevard called the Center for Spiritual Wisdom. Now, don't let that word spiritual scare you. They sponsor wonderful conversations and discussions about all kinds of topics that will stretch you, make you grow as a person. I highly recommend that you check them out. It's Terry, Cindy, and Sophia. Good to see you all this morning. And of course, they're not visitors, but Carol Flake and Dan Clem. Carol's a former member of a former congregation of mine, the UU congregation in Columbia. We had to kick her out because she was so rambunctious, but so now y'all are stuck with her. But it's good to see y'all this morning.
I just have a couple of announcements. Our pledge drive is ongoing, so look for more news about that. I want to recognize that one of the slides this morning about mindfulness meditation has a slight error. That takes place at 3 o'clock on Tuesdays rather than 2:30. This is the last Sunday in February, and therefore the last day that we will have the envelopes for our February charitable partner, Bread of Life. And so be aware that you can always donate to Bread of Life, but this is the last month that they'll be our partner. And I'm going to turn things over to John now.
Thank you, Vanessa. I don't know if you all remember the last time you saw most of the choir in blue and or yellow. It was about 11 months ago, in the first 2 Sundays in March, as quick as we could get it together to sing the Ukrainian national anthem after the Russian invasion of that country. As someone has already mentioned, we've just passed the 1-year anniversary of that act of war. And we want again to sing for you the Ukrainian national anthem. The words of this, which we will sing it in Ukrainian. I have a multi-talented choir. But the English goes approximately like this. Ukraine's freedom has not yet perished, nor has her glory. Upon us, fellow Ukrainians, fate shall smile once more. Our enemies will vanish like dew in the sun, and we too shall rule, brothers, in a free land of our own. We will lay down our souls and bodies to attain our freedom. The Ukrainian national anthem.
Thank you, choir. Thank you. It is good to be back with you today. It feels like coming home whenever I do visit with you. Opening words are a reversal of the famous prayer from St. Francis. You remember that prayer, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace? This is a reversal of that prayer, and it goes like this. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. Where there is apathy, let me provoke. Where there is compliance, let me bring questioning. Where there is silence, may I be a voice. Where there is too much comfort and too little action, grant disruption. Where there are doors closed and hearts locked, grant the willingness to listen. When laws dictate and pain is overlooked, when tradition speaks louder than need, grant that I may seek rather to do justice than to talk about justice. Disturb us, O Lord, to be with as well as for the alienated, to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Lord, make me a channel of disturbance. And now I invite you to stand as you're willing and able for our opening hymn, number 360. Here we have gathered.
We'll now move more deeply into our worship service with the lighting of our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. And I'll speak some words by Frances Kojar. She's a Canadian Unitarian Universalist, a social justice advocate, and an author, bringing us home to love. We light this chalice today as a people dedicated to personal growth. May it burn away the oppressions we have been taught and glow instead with the humility of learning. May it reignite our dreams for a better world and kindle our joy for simple living. May its warmth extend out into the forgotten alleyways of exclusion and bring us home to love, to welcoming, and to all the challenges, the questions, and the blessings of this beautiful path to becoming a beloved community. Now I'd like to call forth Kevin Lausch with some wisdom for all ages.
Hey, good morning. My name's Kevin. I have the wonderful opportunity to work with our kids and families here. And today we are finishing our theme of love, which is our theme for February. It's also, of course, Black History Month, and as always, through all of what we do with the children's religious exploration, we're always trying to highlight people of color. This book today is called Who Are Your People by Bakari Sellers. And Bakari Sellers is a CNN commentator. He was, I found out, the youngest elected African-American official ever, and he was elected, I think, at 24 to the South Carolina legislature, writes books, and Reverend Neal and him were friends in theological seminary? Oh, in Columbia, South Carolina. There we go. So, who are your people? Oh, and I must also say it's illustrated by Reggie Brown. When you meet someone for the first time, they might ask, "Who are your people and where are you from?" Who are your people? You should always be proud of who you are. Your people are strong and smart. They dreamed of things not yet seen and imagined that we could all be free. Your people were fighters. When they told they had to leave because of the color of their skin, they sat down. Your people were mighty activists, champions that struggled for justice and equality. They marched so that people would know your life matters. And they stood up and ran to make history and change lives. Your people were trailblazers who changed laws and broke records. Today, we stand on their shoulders. When they ask, "Where are you from?" You're from a land where the soil is dark and matches the richness of your skin, where cotton and sugarcane were strongly rooted and match your strength and determination. You are from the country where time moves with ease and kindness is cherished. We say a simple hello to our neighbors to let them know we see them. You come from a place where the aromas of cakes and pies waft from the windowsills to fill your bellies with goodness and your hearts with love. You are a product of the proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." You're from a place filled with love and hope and expectation, where people rooted for you to succeed. Today, we stand on their shoulders. On their shoulders, you are so strong and so loved. On their shoulders, you can reach for the sky. So what will you dream, and how will you change the world? And that is Who Are Your People by Bakari Sellers. And now we will gather the children and we'll continue to find out about who are your people, who you're loved by, and how love binds us all together in community. And would you bring up the candle, please, buddy? And we'll sing the children out.
Our reflective reading this morning comes from historian Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It's based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. But if we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending the spinning top of a world in a different direction. Let's take a moment to reflect on these words. Amen.
It's not always possible to understand the words as much as we try to pronounce them in a way that will be understandable to you. But the text of this anthem that we're going to sing now, it's called When Angels Sing. Within each lifetime, an angel's voice is heard. Celestial sounds pierce time and space. And for a moment, the breathless beauty of heaven's song reveals God's grace. Peace in our hearts. Peace when angels sing. Peace, be still and listen, heart. Listen when angels sing.
Within each lifetime, an
UUTC's mission is to support individual spiritual journeys and to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. And when Reverend Bob or I or whoever stands before you on a Sunday morning and asks for money, it's to support that mission. Our offering feeds that mission in the same way that our donations to Bread of Life feed people. So whether it's dropping something in the basket this morning or clicking online to support this place and our charitable partner, we'll be grateful. And know that for all of your gifts, we are grateful. And now it's my privilege to introduce the Reverend Dr. Neal Jones, who is no stranger to this pulpit. In fact, I've been thinking about this. If we gave out prizes for the most memorable sermon title ever in this space, your most recent one would have to be in the top 10. At just about this time last year, in case you missed it, Reverend Neal advised us on 10 tips for being miserable. A psychologist at the Pisgah Institute in Asheville, Reverend Neal is a North Carolinian born and raised. He earned his BA from Wake Forest University and his master's in divinity from Southeastern Seminary, and his doctorate in psychology, did I get that right, from Baylor University. He has served as the minister of 5 congregations in North and South Carolina, in Texas, in Pennsylvania, and most recently at Mainline Unitarian Church near Philadelphia, and at the UU Congregation of Columbia, South Carolina. He also serves as the chair of the National Board of Trustees of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Besides teaching us how to be miserable, Reverend Neal has also preached to us on social justice and the common good. We are so glad to have you again, Reverend Neal.
And I'm so glad to be back with you. Thank you, Vanessa. Well, I want to apologize at the outset. Any people of color who may be in our midst or watching online with us this morning, because this morning I'll be speaking to white people. I want to talk this morning about what it means to be white. And I want to do so because it's a spiritual issue. There's that word spiritual again. In a previous visit, I think I shared with you my definition of spirituality. It's a very subjective term. I think everyone has their own definition of what that means. My definition is I see spirituality as our innate, universal human capacity to get beyond ourselves. And I broke it down into several abilities which, if developed, would enable us to get beyond ourselves, such as the capacity for reverence, gratitude, stewardship, self-worth, love, justice, creating meaning and purpose, facing our mortality. Now, to this list, Buddhism would add the capacity for enlightenment. Indeed, the term Buddha itself means enlightened one. To become enlightened means to become conscious, to become aware, to wake up. To what? Well, first of all, to become aware of ourselves, our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and actions, many of which are unconscious. And so our spiritual growth calls upon us to become conscious of what is unconscious. And when we do, we become more alive and more authentic. But in addition, waking up involves becoming aware of our environment, our families, our community, our society, our culture, our religion, our history, our politics, our economics, our planet, because we do not exist as isolated individuals in a vacuum. We are shaped by our environment, again in ways that are largely unconscious. So our spiritual growth demands that we become conscious of what is unconscious. And when we do, we become more responsible to and for others. But for most of us white people, our self-awareness typically does not entail an awareness of our whiteness. Even among those of us who consider ourselves liberal, well-educated, sophisticated, open-minded, and spiritually evolved. Why is that? It's because we're a part of the dominant culture in which whiteness is treated as the default setting. We can blend into the background. We are afforded the privilege of referring to people who aren't white as the other, as in saying, oh, he's African American, or she's Hispanic, or they're Asian. We don't identify other Caucasians by saying, oh, they're white, because in our culture, whiteness is assumed, unless otherwise noted. And anyone else is different. Toni Morrison says that in this country, American means white. Everybody else has to hyphenate. I'd go further, and I'd say that in this country, to be a human being means to be white. Listen to these sentences. He walked into a room and immediately noticed her. The new sitcom is about a middle-aged, middle-class couple and their 3 children. The average American drinks 2 cups of coffee a day. She didn't know if she would get into the college of her choice. I have a friend with ADHD. Now, didn't you assume that all those people were white? We white people are not even used to thinking about being white. We take it for granted. Now, people of color don't have this privilege. They can't ignore race because their very lives depend upon the ability to notice differences in color. They live in a culture which constantly reminds them of their skin color, which tells them in a million ways, large and small, that they are not as important as white people, that their lives actually do not matter as much as white lives. Our police practices say that black lives do not matter. Black motorists are 31% more likely than whites to be stopped by the police. 28% of black men under the age of 25 are stopped by the police because they look or act suspicious, compared to only 13% of white men. Every black person in this country knows that the two most common crimes in America are a WWB and a DWB, walking while black and driving while black. Once pulled over, black drivers are 3 times more likely than whites to be searched and twice as likely to be arrested during a traffic stop. Young black men are 7 times more likely than young white men to be killed by the police. Even though black men make up only 6% of the population, 40% of all unarmed people shot and killed by the police are black men. Our criminal justice system says that black lives do not matter. The total black population in America is 13%, and yet 37% of our prison population is black. Black citizens are typically given more severe charges and longer sentences than white citizens who commit the same crimes. 1 out of 3 black men is incarcerated or serves parole or probation during his lifetime. Our educational system says that black lives don't matter. Black students are suspended and expelled 3 times more often than white students. And the differences in discipline between black and white children begin in preschool. As a result, black children are more likely to repeat a grade, to drop out, and become involved in the juvenile justice system. Teachers typically call on white children more often and have higher expectations of them than black children. On average, white children will have more money spent on their education, have more experienced teachers, and are given more opportunities and resources to learn than black children. Our healthcare system says that black lives do not matter. 22% of African Americans are uninsured compared to 13% of whites. And having insurance matters. People without insurance are less likely to seek medical care and are therefore more likely to get sick more frequently and more seriously and have shorter lives than those with insurance. Therefore, it should be no surprise that African Americans are more likely than whites to suffer from a chronic condition, such as diabetes, high blood pressure, asthma, and heart disease. That infant mortality rate for African Americans is twice as high as for whites. And that the life expectancy of a black child is 5 years shorter than for a white child. Our economic system says that black lives don't matter. The net worth of the average black household in the U.S. is $6,000, compared with $110,000 for the average white household. Whites in America on average own 18 times as much wealth as blacks. Black men earn 71 cents for every dollar that white men earn doing the same job. Black women earn 64 cents. The United States now has a greater wealth gap by race than South Africa did during apartheid. Now, these aren't stats from 1952. These are from 2022. And I could go on and on. In every area of American life, America says that black lives don't matter, which is why we need to say with bright yellow banners in demonstrations and on the roadside that black lives matter. That banner, which many of us you use, display in front of our congregations, is not just for other people who happen to drive by. It's there for you and me. We need to be reminded that black lives matter. Why? Because we are white people who live in the United States of America, where black people were bought and sold as livestock for 250 years until they were freed by a civil war, only to be kept in their place by lynching. And how cruelly ignorant it is to say that Americans have had to learn to live with terrorism since 9/11. Black Americans have been living with terrorism for centuries. And after emancipation, black Americans were then segregated from the rest of society because they were regarded as being inferior, as not deserving equal treatment as human beings. Segregation may have officially ended, but racism continues. And now I've gone and used the R word. If you're like me, you instinctively think to yourself, I'm not racist. I have black friends. I don't use the N word. I don't discriminate against black people. Racism ended back in the civil rights movement. Why, we've even elected a black president, which proves that we're now post-racial. The problem with this way of thinking, that many of us think this way, including myself, is that it ignores the power of the past and the context of culture. The racist attitudes that supported slavery, lynching, segregation, and discrimination didn't just evaporate into thin air when the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act were passed back in the 60s. They're still there in the people who have taught and nurtured us, in the lessons we've learned, in the schools and churches we've attended, in the books and articles we've read, in the movies and TV series we have watched, in the advertisements we have seen, and all the data our unconscious minds have collected over our lifetimes. We're like fish that swim in a biased ocean. We do not choose the water we swim in. We don't even think about it or aware of it. We just go about our daily lives while the water we are immersed in influences us in ways we don't even recognize. All those stats I cited earlier are the many ways our society continues to discount the value of people of color in comparison to the value of white people, are proof of what William Faulkner said. The past is not dead. It's not even past. Let me cite a few other recent examples. A few years ago, you may remember there was a groundbreaking superhero movie released called Black Panther. What made it groundbreaking? It was one of the very few movies to cast an African American as a superhero. For decades, white superheroes like Batman and Wonder Woman have become the archetypes of honor and bravery in American culture, while black characters have been grossly underrepresented, if represented at all. But then, after 17 films since the Marvel Cinematic Universe began, a movie placed the fate of the world in the hands of a black man. Philadelphia Inquirer writer Brandon Hardin wrote back then, quote, "As a boy, as much as I loved and believed in the fantasy of heroism, I felt inadequate because the heroes that appeared in the movies and on television never looked like me. I didn't see black people do extraordinary things like live in different worlds and fly and have superhuman strength. We didn't do stuff like that." End of quote. Why not? Why haven't African Americans been cast as superheroes or even as common variety heroes? Because it makes us white people uncomfortable to see black people who are strong and powerful. We have been taught unconsciously, sometimes consciously, to fear strong black people. Given this backdrop of fear, what could be more frightening than having a black man occupy the most powerful position in the world 2 presidencies ago? This irrational, deep-seated fear is what gave birth to and kept alive for the longest time the so-called birther movement. Remember that? The lie that President Obama was not born in the United States, but that he was born in Kenya, that he is a Muslim, that he was raised in a madrasa in Indonesia. See, it was not enough to charge that his beliefs were un-American or that his policies were un-American, but the accusation was that our first president himself was not an American. This lie expresses the illegitimacy of a person of African descent as a true American. Here's another example of how the past is not dead or even past. Remember when African American quarterback Colin Kaepernick and other NFL players have taken a knee, have kneeled instead of standing during the national anthem to protest the inordinate number of young black men at the hands of police? Nevertheless, even though it was a very respectful, quiet form of protest, nevertheless, these peaceful, respectful protesters have had their patriotism questioned, their motives maligned, their methods attacked, and their character treated with a kind of open contempt usually reserved for serial killers and child molesters. Why is that? Because it makes us white people uncomfortable to have our racist patterns and prejudices brought out into the open, especially by black people. Rather than hear a message we would rather ignore, we kill the messenger by once again questioning the legitimacy of a person of African descent as a true American. I'm sure you have too. I've heard so many stories of humiliation for being black from personal friends who are African American. There's Rob, who's told me about the way he's regularly treated in department stores, where he's usually either ignored altogether by the sales clerks or he's followed around the store as if he were a thief. There's Dave, who's told me about all the times he's been stopped by the police while driving his car without violating the law. There's Mark, who's told me about standing in the middle of Manhattan, hailing cabs, only to watch helplessly as one cab after another stopped for white passengers, but not for him. There's Sandra, who's told me about having the talk with her teenage son. I understand many black parents have the talk with their sons and daughters about what to do and what not to do, not if he is stopped by the police, but when. She told him not to make any sudden movements, to keep his hands on the steering wheel, and to always say, "Yes, sir." I could go on and on. The past is not dead. It's not even past. We did not choose our skin color. And we're not responsible for what happened in the past. But we are responsible for how we live in the present. And that responsibility includes being aware of how we benefit from the past and how others are put at a disadvantage by it. If we can become more aware, then maybe we can begin to do our part, each of us, to break the patterns and prejudices of the past and to make the present more equal and just and humane for all people. But before you pick up your protest signs and call your representatives, I would urge you to examine yourself with courage and honesty and without guilt or shame. Our whiteness does not make us bad. You and I, as white people, have been part of a collective conditioning that has been going on for a long, long time and is still continuing to this day. If you want to become self-aware, you will need to become aware of this conditioning. You will need to wake up to your whiteness. Amen. I invite you to stand with me as we sing our closing hymn. Number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People. Let us stand as we are willing and able. Our benediction comes from Black theologian Howard Thurman. In the quietness of this place, my heart whispers, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, that in good times and in tempest I may not forget that to which my life is committed. Keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve.